Thank you, Miss Nkemjika from Port Harcourt, all the way from Port Harcourt. Hi, Insika, and I'm Insika joining from the US. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you. Please forgive me. Is am I saying it well? Insika. Is the K silent at the end? Or I should actually pronounce it? Okay, Insika. Awesome. Thank you for joining. Okay, so we're live on YouTube. Yay. Okay. We want to be very mindful of time, and as has been our culture this last few weeks, we would always want to start on time so that we can be respectful of people's time, but also take advantage of the like ensure that we're milking the knowledge from the speakers as much as possible, that you have enough time to share. My name is Chagoziem Adindu. Um, I am the convener of the Domestic Employer series, the Modern Domestic Employer series, and it's been an absolute privilege to just be part of what I think God is doing in our generation and be part of this culture change that we're all starting to really talk about. Very uncomfortable topic for a lot of people, but nonetheless, I think it's a conversation that is long overdue. And I'm just really excited to have the opportunity to bring people into these spaces for us to start having these conversations. Um, Today we're going to be talking a lot about mental health, and I'm really excited because that's one topic I enjoy hearing about, listening to. I have zero, not maybe not zero, because I have Dr. Mfon in my corner who has helped me. She has been very instrumental in helping me understand the many ways in which mental health shows up in our lives. But it's a conversation, especially in the Nigerian sector, in the African space generally. It's one conversation we don't have enough, we're not very knowledgeable about for many reasons. But I'm really excited that we're not just talking about it generally, but we're also going to this is going to be distilled at some point into the context of this program, which revolves around the relationship between domestic employers and domestic workers. How does mental health affect them? I would also say that if you're just joining, week one was basically about changing our mindset. So the speakers for week one talked a ton about some of the mindsets that we have had over a period of time, especially as Nigerian employers, that we need that basically creates chaos and just reintroducing us into a new way of thinking about the domestic employer, domestic employee relationship and what it really is, what it could be. Sometimes we need to name certain things for us to move from that pattern. We need to feel comfortable with the discomfort of naming certain patterns as they are while we're painting pictures for what could be. And so I feel like week one's conversation was super helpful because all the speakers after that have built on that, week one, the context of week one. The other thing that we did for week two was basically ensuring that now that we have a different mindset, we start to have like difficult conversations around ensuring that um, our hiring processes are values based. In other words, how can we ensure that we're hiring based on our values? How are we sure that how can we start to think of this domestic work in the context of the culture of our homes? How can we start to look for people who fit into what we're trying to build in our families? And that brings us today to all of that. And then last week too, we did sex proofing your home, which was amazing, simply amazing. And I remember that speaker just walking us through the conversations that need to be had around ensuring that everybody knows to sex proof their homes, whether it's to protect your domestic workers from even the predators on the inside, or even to protect your children from domestic workers that come with predatory, habits. Just having that conversation about the fact that unlike the workplace, the relationship between the domestic and the relationship and the structure of the domestic work culture is very different. But all hands need to be on deck to ensure that the home is safe, both as a workplace and as a living residential, space. And that relationship sometimes can get very wonky if we don't take care of it very like ASAP, if we don't talk about these things and if we're not cognizant of how this thing translates into the relationship between a domestic employer and their workers. Today's conversation is now building on week 1 and week 2, and we're going to be talking a lot about mental health. And I'm super excited to have the opportunity to introduce our speakers for today. In no particular order, I'm going to be introducing, and just also so that we have an idea of how today is going to flow, it's going to be very interactive. I have the privilege of being the moderator of today's session, and I'm going to be asking questions to our facilitators. So I would introduce them. But again, just before I start, what we're doing to ensure that everybody was carried along is please let us know where you're joining in from. So your name and where you're joining in from. Excuse me. While we're sending in those information, I will start by introducing Mr. Chuka Ononye, one of our speakers for today. Thank you so much, sir, for coming. He's a public mental health communications specialist whose work spans Africa. As a regional coordinator of the Mental Health Innovation Network, MHIN Africa, he leads knowledge exchange across the continent, strengthening collaboration and amplifying innovation in global mental health. He also serves as a communications consultant on several mental health research grants across Africa, with expertise in youth mental health advocacy and service user rights. He works alongside people who have lived experience of mental illness. Chuka holds an MSc in child and adolescent mental health from the University of Ibadan. Can we virtually make welcome Mr. Chuka? Can we pump those hearts, send the clap emojis, send your favorite emojis? Thank you, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Nice to be here. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And our second speaker today is Dr. Ufon Ahime, and she's a mental health physician, speaker, and advocate who is passionate about helping individuals build healthier, more fulfilling lives through practical mental wellness education. She's the founder of Higher Living Today, the banner she has behind her. Um, and Higher Living Today is a platform dedicated to promoting mental well-being, resilience, and emotional health through education, advocacy, and community engagement. Dr. Mfon has a lot of years of experience supporting individuals and families, and she's committed to breaking the stigma around mental health and making conversations about emotional well-being accessible, practical, and actionable. She makes that conversation very accessible, and that's her focus, making it very practical and actionable. Her work focuses on helping people recognize the signs of mental distress, develop healthier coping strategies, and prioritize their well-being in everyday life, everyday living. As a speaker, Dr. Mfon brings warmth, insight, and practical wisdom to conversations on mental health, self-care, burnout prevention, and emotional resilience. Please let's put together our hands together, send in those love emojis. Send in and let's appreciate our speakers for today. I'm so excited for today's conversation. Again, I don't know how many times I've said it, but I don't know if I'm saying it enough, but super excited, super excited. I'm just going to pause, and before we start, I want to tell you that if there's somebody you know that should be here that is not here, we're giving you 60 seconds to say, sis, Oga bro, come in and let's join this conversation, because when you see good news like this, you don't want to be you know, not inviting people that are dear to you. So please feel free to send that link to somebody else and say, I need you to join, like can't be left out. And it doesn't have to be only those who are domestic employers. We have had to partner with people who do a lot of work with domestic maybe in Sunday school, like people who have encounters with these people, people who, maybe teachers of a certain grade, of people who encounter these domestic workers in any form, please bring them in. Of course, our primary focus will be people who work with them. So if you have a domestic employer or someone who is even aspiring, someone who is like, oh yeah, when I get married, or I'm married and now I'm thinking of having kids, I'm thinking of having a domestic worker. I feel like these conversations should be more preventive so that we can reduce how many of these headlines, how many of these stories make it to the headlines that are very gory. If people are knowledgeable, I feel like some of the mistakes some of us have made will be prevented immensely. So feel free to send that link to somebody else. How we're going to do today's session is I will share my slides, and the slides basically will walk us through the questions. Dr. Ofon is going to focus on the mental health of the employers. So you're going to be hearing a lot. I mean, she's going to also chime in here and there, but her focus would be on helping employers understand what mental health, how mental health affects them personally, like individually, especially in the context of the domestic work situation. Mr. Trika, on the other hand, will be telling us a ton about what to know about about the mental health of your domestic employee, right? Because it's a conversation, I know there will be overlaps, and please feel free. Your questions would have your questions at the end. Feel free to also send in those chats during the conversations just so that we can pick them up after. But that's basically the flow for today. I'm going to go ahead now and share my screen and we will start. Have you invited somebody? Please let me know when you can see my screen. Can you see my screen?
Yes, it's up now.
Okay, thank you. Okay, without much ado, having welcomed our speakers, we're going to start the conversation right away. This was basically all I had shared initially, how we started, what week one was all about, the mindset re-engineering, like having those conversations afresh, changing our mindsets. And then week two, we did values-based hiring and sex-proofing your home. And this is week three. We're going to starting first with just a general understanding of mental health. My understanding before now was if you say someone has mental health issues, you're thinking of maybe the person is having an outburst, or the person is like there are some extreme indicators of poor mental health, like whatever that looks like. But over a period of time, I've come to learn that there are subtle, quiet ways it shows up in our lives, right? And I guess that's just an introductory way of inviting our speakers to help us break down this big thing that has become now it's a thing. People say, well, I have mental health break. I have poor mental health, but I don't know that we know what we're talking about. I just feel like it's something that has become very trendy and very cool to say. Um, Again, so I'm hoping that our first conversations can help demystify what mental health is. So I'm just going to start. Please feel free to, anybody can start. But the first question we have today is how do you define mental health in your own words? Very simply. Somebody joining in hasn't heard about this, has heard people using it everywhere, but they just want to go out with a concrete definition. What's mental health? Dr. Fon, please go ahead. I think I see you're muted.
Okay, yeah. So I like to use the World Health Organization's definition because it's pretty simple, right? And it's kind of all encompassing. They define it as a state of well-being where an individual is able to realize his or her ability, can cope with the normal stresses of life, which we will find out, talk more about going forward. They're able to contribute to their community and then work productively. This is where we see the difference, right? When you say, okay, I think mental health has to do with illness, we have to understand that mental health deals with your thoughts, how you feel, and how you behave. So thoughts, emotions, and behavior, and how we utilize that to relate with the people around us and achieve our goals. Someone may say, what does a healthy mental state look like? I want you to think about your physical health And I like to use that analogy because there's this big correlation between physical and mental well-being, right? We don't see somebody in the morning and say, this person is physically healthy. We don't do that. But your ability to stand up and sit down and do something means that you have some physical ability to do so. And so it's the same with mental health. Your ability to get up, do certain things, engage in this discussion that we're having now is a sign of mental health. So some of the things that we want to dismisses this. Mental health exists on a continuum. So you cannot say, I'm so mentally healthy or I am this. On that continuum, we can move from a place of a healthy mental state where everything seems to be going well, we're coping with our stresses well, we're productive and all of that. And sometimes based on circumstances, we can move down that continuum to a place where, today I don't feel really too good, I'm finding that I'm easily angered and stuff like that. And then on the lower end of the continuum is where we have mental disorders, which is what most of us usually think about when we hear of mental health. Now, throughout our lifespan, every one of us is going to go, along that continuum. Sometimes everything will be awesome, sometimes not so good. And for some of us, we may actually have come down to the other end of the continuum where we develop a mental disorder. So when you think about it in that light, you begin to see it's different, right? Every day I'm alive and I'm breathing. Mental health is, I have mental health, right? So as long as I'm alive and I'm breathing and I'm able to talk to you and do these things, mental health is taking place, if I were to use that word. So that's a simple way to just describe what mental health is.
That's very helpful. Thank you so much. Dr. Chuka, do you have something else to say? Because I was chatting with Dr. Chuka this morning and I said, I kept sending the wrong slides to him. And I said, oh my God, I think I need coffee. And he said, you need mental health. So Dr. Chuka, please explain, because I was like, okay.
Yes, I think Dr. Fon has really covered the basic knowledge on mental health. I will just add that one key thing that stands out when we talk about mental health is functioning. So if you are able to function, there is a probability or possibility that you are coping with your mental health. That is something you can use to mark how well or how bad your mental health is. That's functioning. So, for example, we know that you can never remove stress from how we go about our daily activities. Because stress is not normal, but we encounter stress in our lives, in our careers, taking care of children, going to work, stress. But the ability for you to cope under those stress and then function is also a very key indicator to know that, okay, even though I'm going through some stuff, I'm still able to function. So, like Dr. Fon said, there are correlations between mental health and physical health. In fact, the way God has made us, it's impossible for you to differentiate mental health, physical health, and maybe spiritual health. They are like bonds, or the way God have encircled them, So, for example, in Africa, let me use Nigeria, for example. Mental health is usually underdiagnosed. Like, people don't know how to express mental health. So, for example, people can come to the hospital and they're not feeling fine, and they don't know how to really describe that they are feeling low, they are feeling down. So they can point it as like, I have malaria, I have fever, and you see that people are usually mental health is usually underdiagnosed for people, because it's not something you can really. It's like they say, they don't write it on the face. You can point to your arm that, oh, I have an arm injury, I have a leg injury. Somebody can say you have stomach ache, you can point at it. But for mental health, how will you really describe how you feel and all that? So those are some of the things I want to bring out, because it's also important. Mental health is basically, to add to Dr. Foye, is how well you are functioning, how well you are contributing to society. Even though you are going through things, you are down, immediately you are not able to function, then that means that that means there's going to be a problem. You are already going into illnesses, disorders, and all that. So yeah, that's just what I want to add to that.
That's very So basically, you're saying our mental health, and I guess I'm also wanting to find out, is it that the mental health affects the physical well-being, or is it the other way around, or do they affect each other back and forth like that? Like which one comes first? Are you sick when your mental health, do you become sick when you have like poor mental health over a period of time? Or
Yeah.
does it the other
Yeah,
way?
Sorry, I
yeah.
would say it's
So,
like
okay, do you
asking the
want to say something?
question. Yeah, sorry, Chika. I would say it's like asking the question, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right? So you when you have a mental health challenge, you're more likely to experience physical symptoms, right? And the same goes for physical illness. For example, if you have a chronic illness like diabetes or cancer, individuals with such chronic illnesses tend to develop certain mental health disorders like depression because there's this connection of mind and soul called dualism, right? What impacts your physical well-being can definitely impact the way you feel. You're less likely to be happy and upbeat if you're bedridden. It's
Hmm.
very challenging for that to happen. And now, if you're experiencing anxiety and you, for example, you have your fear of going out, you're less likely to function optimally, you know. And so, or some people have the fear of eating, the fear of throwing up, so they won't eat. And when you don't eat, your body gets malnourished. That impacts your physical well-being. So both of them can happen interchangeably. Your mental health can impact your physical health, and vice versa.
Okay. Thank you very much. That's very clear. Dr. From why I still have you, I know that when you were defining using the World Health Organization's definition, you said something that was, I said I was going to come back. So you talked about normal stress, and then you talked about mental health being on a continuum. So two questions. First, what's normal stress? Because in Nigeria, do we have normal stress? Is our stress abnormal? Which eventually now flows into my next question. If it's a continuum, do we all have, are we all on, it's like a spectrum, I guess that's what you mean by a continuum, meaning we all are on different parts of that, having a mental health, what for good or for bad, I don't know. Like I'm hoping that you can buttress that point more, also within the context of what normal stress looks like. Because when you hear things like normal, I feel like it's relative, but because we're all
Mm.
Nigerians, I'm hoping that you can pull from our lived realities and make reference to that.
Well, stress is our body's physiological response, physiological and psychological response to any demand, challenge, or change. So you have a new baby. That's a new demand on you, right? It's a challenge. You have to be waking up every 2 hours to feed that baby. So how your body responds to that, both physiologically and psychologically, is what we call stress. And
Hmm.
so we have two types of stress. There's one we call eustress. That's the normal one, right? It's positive. It motivates you. Oh my goodness, my baby needs to eat every 2 hours. And so while it may be inconveniencing for me to wake up every 2 hours, I'm motivated to do that because I know the outcome is, the baby's going to grow and all of that. And so that's normal. You have an exam coming up, you have to prepare for it. You feel that weight of the exam, and then it motivates you to read harder so that you can
Mhm.
have a good grade. That's normal stress. On the other hand, we have what we call distress. And when it comes to distress, it's negative because it's overwhelming. It
Hmm.
drains your energy, it causes anxiety, and it actually decreases your ability to function, which Dr. Chuka had mentioned earlier. Now, sometimes we may experience acute stress, meaning in the moment. For example, somebody with a gun comes into the bank, yeah, they're trying to take out some money, and there's a gunman. You say, everybody lie down. That's acute. Your body goes into that state of fight or flight. What do I do? Do I seek a way of escape, or do I fight this arm robber? Immediately that situation goes, right? The stress, which is the arm robbery, it disappears. Your body returns to a normal state of functioning. But when we have chronic, the stressor is perpetual, is always there. For example, if you're in an unhealthy relationship where you're being demeaned, undermined, gas.
Can you still hear me? Because I can't hear Dr. on phone. Can anybody hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay.
I think she dropped out
Yeah.
somehow.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. Sorry.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
Yes. So if the stress is ongoing, it leads to your body having to continually be in that state of fight or flight over a prolonged period. So the body releases the hormone, stress hormone, which you call cortisol. And because it doesn't have the time to return to a state of rest, all those things begin to impact your body, physical body, and your mental well-being. And so normal stress, it comes, you achieve the goal, it goes, right? This stress is continuous chronic stress. Those are the things that begin to cause us to experience all these mental health issues that take us down the continuum from just, oh my goodness, today I had a bad day. If your day is bad every single day, you're more likely to come down with a mental disorder. And I know we use the word anxiety and depression very loosely, but we want to differentiate between clinical depression and just, oh, I'm so sad. And, or things like, oh, I'm so anxious in the moment, but then it dissipates. So when we talk about the mental disorders on the continent, we're talking about those that are diagnosable.
Okay. Yeah. That makes sense. Thank you so much. I guess we've touched a little bit on all of these questions, but I also just wanted us to tie the loop on who a mentally healthy person looks like. From what Mr. Chuka said, I really like the angle about functioning, because I feel like that's one way we see it. That's one way. And I'm saying this because I want as much as we're being all theoretical at this point, I want us to have like a vivid understanding of what we want to achieve. We want me as an employer to be able to know what it vividly looks like when I am having a bad day, in quotes. I have a thing about labels, bad and good, because sometimes it's about perspective. But if I'm having a bad day, like we're using it for this purposes of this conversation, I should be able to function. That's how I know I am doing well in my mental health. Are there like some other physical ways of identifying or internally tangible ways of feeling when you have a mental health? What does that look like in reality? Both from the employer and employee, like at this point, what should we be looking out for? Patrick, I can go ahead, please.
Okay, can I go for? Okay,
yes.
okay.
Yeah.
So, I will still take it from the angle of functioning, because, like, we have to really, like you said, make it practical that people can, relate with. So one of the things that you have to notice when someone is having a mental health shift or a mental health challenge is a shift in the person's behavior, and the amount of time you have observed is the duration of the shift. So if you have noticed, if you met someone and you notice that, and let me not say profile, you've noticed someone's behavior, maybe the person is a very jovial person, the person is able to deliver on his or her tasks and all that, and you just notice a shift in the person's behavior. Maybe this person that usually laughs suddenly starts not being interested in maybe having a conversation with you. This person becomes more slower in executing his or her job, and a lot of things. So basically is a shift from what you used to know to what is now strange and what you could not profile or understand again. So when you start noticing those shifts, just know that this person, something it might be going through a mental health challenge. Yeah.
Okay. So that's for cases where you already have like an established relationship before then. What about if you're just meeting the person? Like, how can you be aware of? And I'm saying this because there are times when people come into our houses and they already have like mental health challenges. What do we look out for? Maybe Dr. Mfon?
Yeah, so I'll say for one way to identify if somebody has a healthy mental state is that they are able to express a varied range of emotions. Now we try to use we often label emotions positive and negative. I'm just going to use that for now, but emotions in and of themselves are neutral because they're there to tell us something. So if an individual is able to laugh when the occasion, requires you to be happy and rejoice, that's a normal state, a healthy state. If you find that in a joyous situation, an individual is not expressing any form of emotion that that is expected of that situation, it's a sign that okay, maybe something may be going on. And that also involves emotions that we tag as negative. Certain situations are require so you to be sad, to be angry, and so if an individual is supposed to be sad because something happened, maybe for example, you just experienced a very terrible accident or a murder, and the person is just smiling and behaving like nothing happened, then you know that something is wrong, because perhaps in that individual in that moment has gone into a state of shock and the brain is trying to help them cope. And so we want to be saying, okay, an individual is able to express a normal range of emotions. They're able to form and maintain healthy relationships. And we're talking about good relationships, not bad ones. So if an individual finds it very difficult to initiate social engagement, it tells you that something is going wrong, because we as human beings are social beings. And so interacting with other human beings is a normal way of living. So when you are able to do that, you have a healthy mental state. Your ability to learn, at an age that's age appropriate, right, and express things intelligently is also a sign of a healthy mental state, because a lot of our cognitive function has to do with our mental health. And that is why when an individual experiences certain illnesses like a stroke, a bleed in the brain, and it affects certain part of your brains that involve cognitive function, you see that they begin to behave somehow. And so if an individual is able to learn at an age that is required for them, then that's a healthy mental state. I want to say here that we need, when we are determining if someone has a healthy mental state, we also need to realize that what is normal in my culture may be different from what is normal in your culture. And this is really important with the employer-employee circumstance, because if I consider hearing voices to be abnormal behavior, I'm more likely to say, okay, this person in my house is talking to somebody that is not there. They must be crazy. But in their culture, doing that may be normal, so being able to understand what is normal for them and what is, what is normal for me, and being able to make that distinction before you come to the conclusion that something may be wrong. So always important to put in cultural perspective when we are coming to these conclusions about behavior, because it's always different depending on where you come from.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. You see that thing you said about cultural context? I feel like it's a game changer. We're having those conversations at the international level, but even within Nigeria, there are certain cultural nuances we have to pay attention to. I liked what you said about being aware, and that's why this conversation is just for us to get the conversation started. But I feel like the conversation about cultural awareness and how that plays out in our lives generally, but within the context of the domestic employer and employee relationship, is a conversation I want us to really settle down and have. Because half the time, the people that come into our houses come from different backgrounds, religious backgrounds, educational backgrounds, cultural backgrounds, belief systems, home backgrounds, like home cultures, right? Different cultures, and sometimes it shows up. And then sometimes if we're not aware, we call these people witches. We say that they're, but we've not really investigated enough. It's almost like we have been trained in this box, and it's just very difficult for us to think outside of the box to imagine what might be happening to this person. But that's so good. I liked everybody has shared. And I guess my biggest takeout here is also in respect to question two, mental health issues are not necessarily the same as mental illnesses. It can eventually lead to that, is what I have heard both of you say, but they are very different. So when people actually say they have mental health issues, everybody can have it, and there's no stigma about it. I also like that you said feeling what you should be feeling at that time, and it varies for different people. But I think for us, especially as Africans, people of African descent, is that we find ourselves suppressing certain emotions. If you're afraid, someone tell you don't be afraid, you're well with you in Jesus' name, fight fear. Don't worry. Even the way we console people that are grieving, someone has lost somebody, they are crying, you're saying don't cry. Fine, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay, it's okay. Clean your eyes, move on. So just that disconnect between allowing people to be in that state where they should fully ride the emotions and be human, I guess, is what a healthy mindset is. And I'm saying this because one of the first times we had a conversation, I don't know if you remember, I think we were going to have a session like this, but it was more on mental health etiquette. And I don't know what happened with our session. But I was getting so riled up and I was just like, oh my God. And I remember sharing with you, you're saying that's exactly what you should be feeling in this moment. Like, don't fight it. If you're disappointed, you're disappointed. Like, it's okay. I was like, yeah, that's a human thing to do. So that's so,
Yeah.
and I'm going to just move on because if you allow me on this topic, I would juice it and we're still in slide one. But I'm really excited to move to these misconceptions because I feel like a lot of us are sitting pretty on some of these tables, and these are just a few. I know that when you start to talk, you and Mr. Chuka, we're going to go into different aspects of misconceptions, but when it comes to mental health, you know what they say, what you don't know is bigger than you. People have said all kinds of things. So I want us to talk about the misconceptions about mental health because I had some of them and I'm gradually reorienting myself as we go on. Um, I don't know, Mr. Chuka, do you want to start with some of the misconceptions, common misconceptions about mental health and what people are saying and like what people are saying or what people believe and what it actually should be or what is?
Okay, the first and the most general misconception is, most of the time people say that is madness. That's the most general misconception, and that is a very big misconception because even mental health struggles themselves is just a very tiny portion of them that are basically externalizing. When I
Mm,
mean externalizing, I mean someone exhibiting like extremes of maybe anxiety, maybe homelessness, maybe talking to self, roaming the streets, and maybe neglect and self-care. So that is just like very tiny portion, and that most of the time has to do with a mental illness called psychosis. The
mm,
other forms of mental health problems, which I like how Dr. Ufon put it, from there is on a continuum, you know, from even before you even get to the place you call it disorder, there
yeah.
are what we call mental health issues, mental health problems. It's not even a disorder yet. You are just going through a tough time. You're just having anxiety. You saw something, maybe you saw a cockroach on the floor, and then you just had a short spell of anxiety and all that. So mental health is not madness. Most mental health struggles are actually quiet. They are like internalizing, people having worries within themselves, low mood, and, a kind of an internalizing thing. So when we attribute mental health to madness, that is not really the case. So I will just say this one, then maybe Dr. Fong can continue.
Thank you.
Yeah, I want to address the second one that strong people don't struggle emotionally.
Mm,
Um, the truth is that we all struggle. And I try to use this analogy of someone running a half marathon, right? You've prepared, you've done all the training, and then on the day of the run, you're halfway through your half the marathon, and then you find out that you're not going as fast as you were doing during your training. Maybe you had a cold the day before. Maybe the weather changed. Contributing factors, things just came, and you find yourself struggling. Would we say that that individual is not um, apt or what's the word, able to run that marathon? The answer is no, they are. But in that moment, certain things have occurred and contributed to a lag in their ability to run at the pace that they would want to run. So when we say strong people, we may also want to define what we mean by strong people. What does a strong person look like? A strong, so we say strong people don't struggle emotionally. What we are trying to say is that strong people don't show emotions which we consider as weakness, like crying, having a bad day, not being able to get out of the bed. The truth is that strong people do have these things. Unfortunately, because we have this idea, we tend to hide these feelings when we have them and struggles. And so the only time we hear about them is when it has reached critical level where somebody has either attempted suicide
mm,
or committed suicide. And everybody like, oh my goodness, they were so happy. The signs were there, or they hit the signs so well because they were afraid of what people would say. So strong people don't also struggle emotionally, and struggling emotionally is not a sign of weakness. And I want to say that for those who are Christians here, we have several examples in scripture that points us to individuals who were strong. We consider great men of faith like Elijah that struggled emotionally. Many like Elijah too had suicidal ideation. He wanted to die. And God did not come and tell him, pray, like I'm hitting on the next one, pray. Pray. You will not be just pray. Prayer is part of what helps us overcome the challenges we have, because research has actually shown that religion actually offers us a lot of positive benefits to our mental health. But in addition to prayer, there's certain things we need to do. I like the story of Elijah, because when God met him where he was, he didn't ask him, "Oh, ye of little faith." Jesus said that to some people, but God did met his needs. And we need to begin to look at those. There are certain things that may cause an individual to be in a mental health challenge. God met his need for rest and his physical needs. He gave him food, and then he told him to rest. And he gave him food, and he told him to rest. And then, because Elijah was struggling from that feeling of being alone, he reminded him that there were 7,000 other people who had not bowed that. So he connected him to Elisha, relieved some of the burden that he was experiencing. So maybe burnout was part of his issues, so he gave him a community, gave him physical food, and allowed him to rest. And so we need to begin to say, in addition to prayer, what else can we be doing? Prayer in and of itself is not the only coping strategy for mental health challenges.
I love it. You see, for me personally, when people say you're such a strong, I resist that word strong right now. When you say you're such a strong, I tell you I'm not strong. Don't call me strong. I just feel like because of how we have idolized that word strong, that's what they tell people just before they die. You're strong, you're strong, you're strong. Next thing, obituary. Because that strong thing gets into your head and you start to feel like I can do it, I don't need anybody. Oh, should I even talk about the culture of how we're not even open? As a people, our culture doesn't allow us to be open with some of these things. So we don't even share. And I like that you said people would hide these things so well because we haven't actually created a culture. And I'm not talking about interior village. I'm saying the exposed ones of us, the ones who are supposed to be educated and enlightened, have still not even understood this enough to create a space for people to feel comfortable calling us and just saying, this is how I'm feeling. I went through a very dark season in my life it's been 2 years now. And I remember that the comfort I got from Christians it's out. I'm still going to talk about it in a larger platform, but I noticed that I didn't get a lot of comfort from Christians, in quotes, and for no fault of theirs. In fact, I didn't get a lot of comfort from a lot of people, but mostly because what you said, a lot of people will tell you pray. I'm going through a very difficult season. I can't even pray. In fact, to be honest, I wasn't even happy with God. I don't want to hear anything about prayer. And I guess people couldn't just sit with that reality of this is where she's sounding. It's almost like heresy. Like, how can you say that? How dare you not? But if we find, and this is me also just dwelling a lot on the spiritual part, because God doesn't even have expectations for us to be unreal with Him. At the core of the purity of our relationship with God is a level of intimacy that is free of performance. God wants you to come and just cry to Him. So I'm even saying that it's even anti-Christianity, in quote, for us to be inauthentic in our worship of God and in our interactions with one another. So you're coming to God as a good girl. You're sanctifying your prayer. Father, Lord God Almighty, the maker of heaven and earth, in you we live and move. All repetitive, all performative. And that's, I guess it's just the culture we are working in and how it shows up even in our religious practices. And then eventually how it shows up in our relationship with one another. Performative, you have to come up strong, you can't be weak, whatever that means. But I'm really grateful that we're having these conversations today. And the biggest takeout is first of all, mental health is real. I should have said that from the beginning. It's real. It's not Ihendocha. It's not a white people's problem. It's real. All of us have mental health days that we actually, when people say they're taking a mental health break, I respect it now. As a matter of fact, I respect people who are very aware of their emotional well-being. I don't want to be in that space. Like, tell me what you're going through. But I also know that some people have idolized it and it's now a thing. Like, people are just saying it anyhow. Yes, I agree. But if you're able to identify some of these things and sit with yourself enough to reflect, and then after reflecting that you're very compassionate and kind to people going through these things, and you're not in a hurry, because half the time, our restlessness with people going through emotionally intense seasons of their lives is us. Is that we don't know what to do. We can't handle it. So we want to hurry them away so that our relationship can go back to normal and we can feel at ease. So it's almost selfish, right? It's almost like it's not really about them. It's about you being unable to sit with it. Anyway, prayer is fine and I want us to balance it. But so are the tools I feel like God has given us on this side to deal with it. The same way God is the ultimate healer, but sometimes he will use men. The Holy Spirit is your helper, but sometimes this is the era of men. I like to say that this earth is where he has given men dominion. And because he has given men dominion, he has given us tools. So when we pray to him, we still go sometimes to men who have the skills and who have been given the gift to help us walk through some of these things, and there is no shame in it. Dr. Mfon and Mr. Chuka, I know we didn't talk about this, but I was wondering if you can talk a little bit about misconceptions towards even the help, like getting help, mental health help. What should be our approach to therapy? What should be our approach to, like, if we're not praying, are there like resources? And maybe we'll talk about this towards the end. Are there like things people should not feel ashamed to start to take advantage of?
Yeah. One misconception, like I'll take you through the question you asked. One very, very important misconception that I think we should also talk about is the genetic.
Mr. Chuka, we can't hear you. Can you guys hear him, or is it just
aspects of mental health, because
okay?
these days. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can
Yes.
hear you now.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So the genetic aspect of mental health, which I think I've heard a lot these days.
I think he's frozen
Yeah,
again.
his network is bad. Okay.
Mm.
He was talking about the genetic aspects of mental health. I haven't even heard about that. Okay,
He's
Mr.
back.
Chuka, are you back? Can you hear us?
Is, for example, especially now. Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now.
Sorry, I think my internet. Yes. So people come into, I've heard people say, oh, these people have madness in their family. These people have mental health problems in their family. Someone is, in quote, an imbecile, somebody, so don't go close to this family. You are going to have it in your generation if you get married. So it is very important that we talk about this thing because throughout, since I've been studying about mental health disorders, I think the highest genetic, will I call it, load I've ever seen is maybe 2% or even like 2 to 1%. So I want to use this opportunity to tell people that mental health, even, yes, there are some genetic factors. It's not only mental health, even everything we do in life has a genetic component. The way you speak, the way you talk, the way you walk, even your physical illnesses, headaches, everything, they all have genetic components. For example, if your parents or one of your parents has a history of maybe backache, it's possible that you can also have such things. So it's also possible that if your family has a history maybe depression or something, that there is a possibility, but that possibility is graded like under just 1%. So what now happens is that there's what we call resilience, and there's what we call protective factors. So those protective factors are what now protects you against whatever genetic load or anything you have, in your family. So for example, let me break it down. If someone maybe in your family has a history of depression, and maybe you've studied and maybe you are doing well in life, quotes, you have supportive environment and you are doing well, you are most likely not going to maybe have depression because your mom have depression. You can have mental health challenges because of other things, not because your mom or your dad had depression. And also, if someone in your family maybe has autism and all that, it's also good to know that it is not a direct link that you are going to give birth to someone that has a disorder. So we have to make it clear, even people. So, and another aspect of this thing is that even if you think that you don't have it in your family, you don't know your family generation, your family history. traced down your great 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 grandfather. So it's not really about genetics. You have to play down genetics and know that if you take care of yourself, if you have supportive environments, and you look at some of the things that might put you at risk, just like physical illnesses. If you take sugar too much, you might fall at risk to diabetes. The same way, if you put yourself under intense stress, you fall at risk of developing, mental health problems. So that's one aspect I want to talk about.
That's so key. That's amazing.
Mm.
Thank you so much. Thank you. Dr. Fon, do you want to say something before we move to the next?
No, let's move right on.
Okay. I guess we can just quickly run through this and then go into the meat of it. Why should employers care? Because people are joining in here today and they're wondering, yeah, I hear you guys, I believe what you're saying, but what's my business with? How does it affect me as an employer of domestic workers in my house?
Okay, I'm going to talk. I'm going to say this briefly. I mean, based on all with what we've heard, I mean, we should all begin to picture a house where the employer, and I would like to reference women because for the most part, women are the ones usually in charge of domestic work and workers. Imagine a house where a woman is perpetually under stress, chronic stress, easily irritable, I can't make cognitive decisions based on information and is impulsive in their decisions. Think about how that influences her interaction with this domestic worker. Chances are that the communication will be bad, expectations will not be clear, and when we begin to shout and treat other people like they are inhumane, right? Because we are in a state of, we are unable to control our own emotions. We instill fear into this individual. And I believe Mr. Chuka will talk more about that. They become anxious. An anxious person is less likely to be motivated to do their optimal best. Think about yourself if you are in a work environment where you're under a supervisor or a boss. How often were you motivated to do your best when you were insulted, called out or ignored or not giving clear instructions? Chances are that you did not perform well. And so we need to see how that translates into the employer-employee relationship in the house. So a healthy mental state will allow for a lot of good outcomes, both for the employer and the employee, because the individual involved will be able to communicate properly, to be able to address discrepancies properly, and conflict resolution will happen as they should, which will eventually lead to the outcome that they desire, which is a stable house where things are going well. So it's really important that an employer should take into consideration what their mental health state is. Now, I know that the stresses of that we have as women and men, building a home, providing, be parenting, and still able to show up and now manage another individual can really make you neglect this aspect. But we need to begin to look at it from that lens that if I'm not well, chances are things will not run well. It's just like when you're physically ill and you have a small child. That child suffers because you're unable to meet their needs. So the same applies when it comes to our mental health. If the employer is not mentally healthy, it's going to negatively impact the functioning of the home.
Well said. Thank you so much. Absolutely. And with that being said, I'm going to move to the next slide, and we're going to Dr. Mfon is going to walk us through understanding mental health from the employer's perspective, and then we'll quickly round up with Dr. Chuka's, Mr. Chuka, Dr. Chuka. Mr. Chuka's, well, he's a doctor in the making. Anyway, we're going to end up with his session. So forgive me when I keep going back and forth. He's a doctor. I'm not calling him. He's actually a doctor in the making. So forgive me that I keep going back and forth. Dr. Mfon, I feel like there are a lot of hidden emotional things that we're not talking about as employers. Because when you walk up to somebody and you're saying, I think you have a mental health issue, it can come off as an insult. But I feel like we need to start talking about some of these things and what they look like. For me personally, as an employer of labor, that thing you said about being impulsive, just not having a plan, like can create a lot of load on the family. You don't have a cooking plan, you don't have a cleaning plan. Like, yes, you have a domestic worker, but how prepared are you for this person? And when there's lack of structure, how does it affect you as the employer, like you said, and how does it eventually flow into your relationship with your staff?
Yeah, I want to start by saying that we can give ourselves a break to an extent, right? Many of us grow up with no knowledge about anything. Depending on the home you grew up in, some homes had structure, some did not. You know, some of us had parents who were authoritarian in their approach, and all these are learned behaviors that we take and translate into our own homes. You know, other people had parents that were laissez-faire. Whatever happens, happens. You know, and so you carry that into your own home, and you begin to build your home based on what you learned or what you saw growing up. And sometimes it can be for good or bad. For example, I grew up in a home where both parents were very punctual. If something was at 1 p.m., my parents would be there at 12:45. You know, it's standard. In my own home, I see myself exemplifying that. And so if I were to have a domestic worker who comes from a home where time management is not a thing for them, you can see that that's already a stressor. And it will bring about conflict between both people. So we need to understand, okay, what are some of the first question is, what emotional pressures do many employers carry without recognizing them? Well, we already talked about them. Stressors like your own relationship with your spouse, if you are married. If that relationship is struggling, it's going to definitely impact the entire home in how you relate with your domestic worker. Workplace environment, financial pressures, right? You have more needs than money can meet. Security problems. Let's just mention the things that are happening in Nigeria now, or even across the world. Economic crisis. These things are pressures that we carry. But unfortunately for us, we get used to just talk. This is what it is. We just have to keep going. Unbeknownst to us that in our subconsciousness, certain things are happening because, like I said, that chronic stress, the stress hormone continues to be released over time and it's impacting both our physical and mental well-being. Now, you find out that when you are really stressed, it affects your communication. Why? Because the part of our brain responsible for executive functioning, that's the prefrontal cortex, is disrupted. When you're in a heightened state of emotion, you think that there's something you need to fight off or fight, the emotion part of your brain takes over. And so that's why immediately you see a bell, you see a dog barking and you're coming to you. You don't have time to sit down and start saying, what kind of dog is that? How likely is this dog going to, get to me? You get into a flight mood, move quickly because your body feels that there is danger and is responding to that. So imagine that you're on a everyday or a daily basis, your brain thinks you're in a dangerous situation. You'll find that you're acting out of emotions and not out of executive functioning. You're not thinking things through. So, for example, if you have a communication with your employee and they say something, because you're so stressed, you may not hear what they said. You may jump to conclusion. You may not clarify, and then you make judgment based on what you think you heard. And most times it's usually, it has a negative outcome. For example, if I come home and my domestic worker was supposed to clean the house, I'm having guests at 6, and I come home and everywhere is scattered, the laundry is still in the laundry bag. What's my first reaction? I get angry. Why am I angry? That's where emotional intelligence comes. If you're able to identify why you're angry, okay, all right. What other possible reasons could there be for what has happened? But if you're stressed, you don't have the time to think about that. You may find yourself, you begin to shout, where are you? How dare you? And sometimes, unfortunately, especially in Nigeria, we even hit and beat our domestic workers, and if you were not stressed, or if you were able to self-regulate, you could probably calm down, still angry, but be able to self-regulate and say, what happened? This is not what I expected. This is not how I expected the house to be when I came back at 5. And then they could probably have a reasonable explanation for why things are that way. So stress affects our communication. It impacts our ability to discipline. Think about it, you and your own children. There are times when you've disciplined your children out of anger and not because you were going to correct them. I have an example of when my son was almost 4. I was stressed. I just had another baby. It was a C-section. I was here in America by myself. There was no, that social support, which we talk about protective factors. It wasn't there. I was so overwhelmed. And then this boy just starts doing something. I didn't know when I took the charger off my phone and started flogging him. When I came to that consciousness, I was like, God, what I just did now is abuse. Right? Because this is not discipline. This is abuse, because I'm acting from a place of impulsivity and not, the discipline, or what I thought was discipline, punishment I was meting at, it did not match what he did. So think about that. Stress will definitely negatively impact the way you discipline or carry out, because I don't want to use the word discipline. These people are, if they are employers, if they are employees, we should not be treating them like they are our children that we want to discipline, right? If we have the terms of condition, that is what should guide the way we, we resolve things that go contrary to what we desire. So it definitely affects that, and it affects decision making. You're more likely to make poor decisions when you're in a heightened state of emotion, whether that be anger or even happiness. Sometimes, somebody will be so happy, they say, I'm going to buy the drinks for everybody in the bar. That's a poor decision, right? So it's not just when you're annoyed. So it definitely affects the way we communicate. And so what does emotional intelligence look like? Emotional intelligence has to do with you being able to identify your own emotions, right? Be aware of it, then be able to manage them, be aware of the emotions of other people, and then determine how you relate with them so that you can get the desired outcome. So like I said, if I were able to pause to tell myself, why am I upset in the moment? That's self-awareness. I give another example. One day my son just came down and was like, what are we eating for dinner? And I just got angry. I just got angry. Every time I hear somebody ask that question, what are we having? I just get angry. And one day I had to pause and say, why are you angry? That's self-awareness. That's emotional intelligence. It is not because they were asking, what are we having for dinner? It is because that question brought about the knowledge that it means I have to do something. I have to solve that problem, and I was not ready to solve it, or maybe I didn't want to solve it. So that awareness came to me like, okay, I don't need to be shouting at this boy. He just asked a question. The issue is with what that question resonates in me. So that's emotional self-awareness. Now, the ability to regulate. You come home and everywhere is scattered. The house help has not done what they should do. You have the right to be angry. Remember, emotions are neutral. Anger is telling that something is going on you need to pay attention to. So terms of contract have not been kept. So you're angry. So what do you do when you're angry? Some people like to hit people when they're angry. Some people like to scream, shout, insult, demean, push down. And all these things are contrary to a healthy well-being or for the house entirely. So I want to say, okay, how am I going to regulate myself when I'm angry? If I know what my stresses are, when I see them happening, how do I self-regulate? You can just take a break, go out, right? Take a walk. That is self-regulation. Your ability to also see that your employee, and I know that Mr. Chika will talk more about that, is acting in ways, like he said earlier on, that is contrary to their normal way of behaving. That's people, you're being aware of the other person's emotion, and you're able to look beyond their words, because people can say, I'm fine, but their nonverbal cues are telling you otherwise. And so that is being aware of the other person's emotion and being able to say, okay, I can see that something is going on that you're not telling me now. How do we work together to ensure that your needs are met and my needs as the employer are also met at this time, and that definitely helps. The employee feels heard, they feel seen, and they're more likely to be motivated to do their best, because, you're seeing them beyond just someone who's here to meet my needs, and whatever else matters doesn't matter, So we want to be able to say, okay, what are some practical habits that I can begin to adopt to take care of my mental well-being so that I can be present for the employee and my entire household. And the wonderful thing about this is that whatever you learn to do with your domestic worker can also seep into your relationship with your spouse and your children, so it's a win-win for everybody. Now, when we talk about self-care, people always think about, oh, what do you do for self-care? Oh, I go to a spa and, I just have a massage, and you do that once in 6 months. That's not self-care. Self-care is what you do on a regular basis that you enjoy. There are activities you enjoy engaging in that make you feel good and better. And for the most part, we do that every day, like eating well, right? Have you noticed that when you're stressed, you tend to eat poorly? You reach out for snacks and highly processed foods because they make you feel good. So physical well-being is self-care. You eat healthy. You go on walks. You take a break from your screen. People have used the screen now as a coping strategy to either avoid the problem or, to just laugh at all the funny reels. They feel good in the moment. In some level of moderation is fine, but when you find yourself always going to your screen, to social media as a way of coping, it's unhealthy because you're not solving the problem. It can provide you with a temporary relief, but it doesn't help long term. So we want to say, okay, what are some ways I can take care of myself physically? Go for this yearly physical checkup because, like we have mentioned, Mr. Chuka has mentioned, your physical health impacts your mental well-being. If you're down with a common cold, you know how that impacts the way you feel. So we need to be okay, I'm going to take care of my health. I'm going to eat well. I'm going to go on walks, do this exercise. I'm going to ensure that my spiritual well-being is also taken care of. That's self-care. Reading, praying, coming together as a community of people who believe in the same thing. That's self-care. So those things that we do on a normal daily basis. And something I want to point out is that most times what we do for self-care is the first thing to go out of the window when we're stressed. We're less likely to go to the gym when we think we have too many things to complete. So taking care of yourself will ensure that your mental health is in a good place for you to be the employer that you need to be to your domestic worker. So I don't want to talk too much. We'll just summarize that so that we can move ahead.
Oh my goodness, so good. See, if you're watching and she's dropping lights, can we be showing love on the go? Can we be clapping? You people, like, let's be doing well now. Let's be clapping and encouraging because I'm just here taking notes. I'm just in awe of how much liberation I'm getting. But every time I'm hearing this, I'm just asking myself, gosh, I wish I had someone tell me some of these things super early. I wish I knew to be very mindful of my emotions. And you see that thing you said about what's for dinner. I think what I wrote here is identifying your trauma and your triggers. Like just staying with it. Because that question says, why are you angry? Like, can we stop and ask ourselves, why are you shouting? Okay, Chair goes in, why are you shouting? Ask yourself that question. There was a time, I shared this with us yesterday when we were doing our tech check, but there was a time when I just started noticing I was always screaming at my son and my nan and his nanny, always. And around that time, I had done a 12-week thingy for women. In the process, we had done like a long distance trip. While I was doing that, then I came back and my health just, of course, right? Stress. So I became very sick. And I remember one time she and my son's nanny and my son knocked on my door and they were like, I said, what is it? Someone cannot just rest in this house. Why people, And I was yelling. I remember just after everything, and that's when God just basically started walking me through this journey. Why are you shouting? Because I just remembered crying because I said something is wrong. Talking about functionality. This is not me on a normal day. Why am I shouting on my baby? Like, what did he ever do to me? They just came to knock on my door. Why? Can we stop and say, why? Why am I shouting? It's not okay. And maybe that's the conversation we need to have first. It's not normal. Shouting is not normal. I know we grew up with parents who yelled, neighbors who yelled. It's not okay. It shows poor mental health. Let's name it. People of God, let's name some of these things. If we don't name it, we can't move past it. It's not okay. Okay, Dr. Fan said, ask yourself why. The next thing she said, I want to also reiterate is identify your trigger. If you can sit down with yourself and say, this thing means this to me. And for me, someone said something because, of course, since we start talking about this, I'll just be there and people will send me like reels of people complaining about either someone beating their domestic worker or someone rehashing their traumatic experience with their employers. But someone asked me a question I had never really asked. She said, I wonder what traumatic experience they're living or reliving as they do this. And I was like, sometimes we bash employers and we call them wicked and all, but I've never really thought about the fact that some of these people might be traumatized themselves because hurting people hurt other people. Abused people abuse other people. Like that's evil circle, right? That's horrible circle of inflicting what was inflicted on you, because basically you can't give what you don't have. You can't love when you were maltreated, you know, that kind of thing. But I'm hoping that after this conversation that we sit with ourselves and we ask those questions, what's really going on with me? So that for me is so good. I liked that you said you talked about self-care, because I have a mentor that would say, live in a way that you don't have to take a vacation from your life. Because the problem about vacations, if they're poorly planned, you come back to the chaos. Then you need another vacation in another 3 months. But how can we start to have those conversations where we're living our true lives? Where it's like, oh, I'm like, you're aware of the fact that you're walking towards a certain type of life and you're achieving it. Like, you're living your dream life. If you're taking vacation, it's probably for exposure or change of scenery, which is amazing. But you're not changing vacation. You're not changing location to run away from your stress only to come back to it. So I'm hoping that I'm reiterating what you're saying, and I'm hoping I'm aligned. But what I hear you say is, how can you self-care as a routine? How can you take some time off? I remember when I was in Nigeria, something I always did. On Mondays, I don't do anything. I call it my existing day. I just exist. I don't even wait until I'm going to pick my kids from school, because I don't drop them in the mornings. I just lie down. Sometimes I like to myself that I'm praying. I'm not praying, I'm sleeping. I'm just there, just existing. I don't pick calls. I just lie down, read, journal, whatever. And I noticed it helped me massively. Those are the days when ideas were dropping in. I was planning, I was praying. If I could, I would sleep, really sleep. Because Sundays, I noticed that because we served in church, our Sundays were busy, 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 busy. We'll come back exhausted. Then Monday again, we'll start. So identifying, curating, I think I'm inviting us into a space to start to curate a life we want to really live. Like, live it. Create structures. Dr. Fon, you kept referring to terms. Do we have terms? You know, we've been talking about this. Do we have terms regulating our relationship with our employees? Or we're just saying, go and clean, go and work. Someone you brought in as a cook, the person is a cook, nanny, cleaner. It blurs the relationship. It stresses them and it stresses you. What are the terms of engagement? One of the things you hear me say is, your employee is not your family member. It's a harsh truth. Eventually, they can grow to become like family. It happens even in office spaces, right? Your boss likes you so much, they start to invite you for their children's birthday. But that's not the beginning of your relationship. When you came to work for that boss, you were an accountant, an admin person, like whatever it was that your role was. You showed yourself excellently, thrived, and did above and beyond. Then this person said, okay, I believe I can now trust you. I'm going to come and become family. But sometimes we put that horse before the cart, and that's where we blur the relationship. Because once they're family you beat, we will seize their phones. We will control their lives. We are just very, yeah. Anyway, this is not my session. I'm going to move on. Thank you and God bless. But I just made a note that the emotional climate of your home is basically shaped by the emotional health of the leaders. Dr. Chuka, and I'm not going to stop calling you Dr. Chuka. I'm not going to apologize. You're Dr. Chuka. So we're going to move over now to the domestic workers. What are some of the hidden emotional burdens that these people come with? I feel like you're the best person to talk about this, because you've shown me certain aspects of the angles I have never even taken into consideration about domestic workers, including things like telling me that they're vulnerable people. That's something we don't talk about enough. Telling me that people migrating from Enugu to Abuja are migrating, like they're migrants. I had never thought about it. So please, over to you. What should we start to pay attention? And I'm also hoping that you can throw some light into why they're vulnerable and all the things we've talked about behind camera.
Okay, thank you. I think first of all the things that Dr. Fon said is also applicable to domestic workers. And I mean, why it might be a bit difficult for them and why they are unique is that when you look at the economic angle, you see that maybe it's for an employer, for someone to have the capacity to employ someone, it's possible that the person might actually be like on a higher like social scale where the person is able to take care of his family and also employ someone. So it's also likely that the person is exposed, attend webinars like this, have education and all that. And that also has a way of building self-awareness. But for a domestic worker, it's possible that most domestic workers, like you said, are tagged as vulnerable population, even by international labor unions. And that is because of history. Like research shows that most of the people that apply to become domestic workers are always migrants from other countries, from other states and all that. So a domestic worker, most of the times they are not up there in social class, and, they might not have opportunities to have good education and good exposure. And that might also limit the way they also, see themselves, self-awareness, like you mentioned, because self-awareness is very critical when you want to talk about mental health. And that is the ability for you to perceive or identify what someone else is going through and what you yourself is also going through. So why does this really matter for a domestic? Why are we talking about mental health for domestic work? Remember that the home is basically a place we all, especially for those that go to work and come back like a career, the home is basically a place where we come to settle, to, distress, to relax. And the home is basically a place where we renew our mental health. If the home is not good, it's basically you are most likely to experience a cycle of stress from office, then you get back to home, stress, and then you continue. So that's not sustainable. So the workplace for domestic workers, that is usually, your house is usually an intimate place for you. So it's also very important that your mental health or the mental health of your domestic workers are very, very considered in this space. Because imagine you want to go to your room and your domestic worker is just coming out. Like the boundaries are blurred. So it's not like an office space where everybody know the rules. There are rules and regulations. In the home, it's usually the boundaries are very close, very blurred. And then you have other loved ones around them. So it's not just about you. Also, the way your domestic worker also associates or relates with your children, the way he manages, maybe if the person cooks with, the way he manages your food, may he cleans your sitting room and all that. So, and most of the times we see that even people that are close to us, we struggle to even see their problems because of that closeness. When you are used to someone, is when the person is going through distress, is something that is very psychological. It usually goes unnoticed because of maybe familiarity and all that. So the home is a very, very delicate place. And domestic workers, like I said, are very, very vulnerable people. And I've mentioned because of especially because of migration. If you check around, you see that, for example, people that move to Lagos to become domestic workers are not, most of the times, they are not really people from Lagos. They are most likely maybe people from the southeast, the north. So they have migrated to a place where they want to be economically empowered. And I usually put domestic work into two folds. Like I always tell Chiagozim that, especially in Africa, we do two things. That is professional employment of professional domestic workers and child fostering. And we cannot deny it. This is our culture. This is what we do. We go to the village and we pick people. Say, let me train your child. Or even let me, this is what we do in Africa. And while it has its advantages, it has its own disadvantages too. It has also worked for us. So know that when people migrate, it's important that there is nobody, even people that are not domestic workers. When you go to another country, when you travel, when you japa, or when you are settled, you need time to settle. You really need a lot of time to settle, not just even in your environment, even internally within your body. Your body needs to adjust to a new environment. The internal regulation of your biology, your system, need to adjust to weather and all those other things. Not to even talk of coming into a home that you have never been before. You don't know, like, even though you know the rules, you still need time to get yourself acquainted and practicalize the rules. The food might be different. The language might be different. Expectations are different. People that you need to learn their character. So domestic workers need time to settle in. So if you are bringing someone in, whether professional or someone you are taking in from somewhere, the person needs a lot of time to settle. So at the first period, if the person is struggling, what the person needs is just support. It doesn't measure as immediately that the person does not have capacity to deliver. No, I mean, some people come in and you say that this person does that, but most of the times it's just that adaptation period. And most of the people, I'm a sports person. I watch football a lot and I use it as an example. You see great football players, when they move to another club, they take like 1 year to replicate the same performance that they had in their previous club in that the same club. That's the human system. And things around, and because we're also human beings, things around homesickness, separation. By the time you say, by the time, especially for child fostering, people that take other people's children to train, when they leave their families, some of them suffer like for separation anxiety, homesickness, because they are leaving their loved ones and they're going to maybe stay out for some years and all that. Then there are issues of expectations for domestic worker. When a domestic worker is coming, the person might have a lot of expectations of himself, and that might put the person under a lot of pressure to also deliver. So there's a lot of expectations, and that also makes them vulnerable because sometimes they tend to overdo, they tend to overstep boundaries, they tend to even not have the required rest they need just to maybe show you that they can do what you have called them to do. So some of those things put them really at risk. So if I may continue, so there are issues. How can you identify like when somebody has a poor attitude and maybe when somebody is struggling emotionally? So for example, a poor attitude can be consistent over, if somebody does not know how to wash plates or maybe take care of a child, you see it consistent over time. It's not going to change. The person will not be able to learn. You are telling this is who the person is. He cannot do this. It's like he cannot do this. But for someone struggling emotionally, you see that the person maybe came in at a time and then the person learns how to do it. And then at some point, you just notice change, that this person is no longer doing what he used to do. So that will be a sign of an emotional struggle rather than an attitude. So another thing you might want to look out for is the person is selective of what he or she wants to do. For example, the person prefers to wash the car, to clean the car, than to clean your bedroom. So that's an attitude problem. It's basically that the person doesn't like coming to your bedroom and the person prefers to do the car. So it's also a like more of an attitude or skill or expertise, not really an emotional problem. So emotional problem can come like the person is generally sad, the person is generally worried, the person is generally exhausted. So if the person is not able to clean your room, he's not able to have the energy to wash the car. So it's happening in multiple settings, in your room, in your sitting room, not able to go to the market. So then another thing you might have to look out for is, for example, attitude can also improve with like correction. When you correct the person, you said, I've noticed that you always like watching my car. Is there any problem with my room? Is there any problem that you don't want to come to my room and clean up my room? And maybe after that conversation, maybe you find out that maybe there's something in your room that is making the person not comfortable. And immediately that is removed, the person feels more comfortable. So this is an attitude. But when the person is struggling emotionally, you see that even when you correct the person, when you keep correcting, it doesn't shift because there is an underlying emotional struggle. So we said there are some of the signs, general signs, and I'll just take it in bits. So there are some signs, and we said it in the beginning. Some signs can be the most physical way to notice a domestic worker's mental health issue can be in the physical, the one you can see. So it's not even about the person feeling sad. It can also be change in sleep. So you see that this person normally wakes up around 5:30, 6, and then you just notice that this person doesn't wake up again. He wakes up maybe 8, oversleeps, maybe goes to bed very early, or even sleeps the whole time, or even lack of sleep at all, because it's not always the other way. So when you notice, sleep is a very big indicator, and Dr. Ofo mentioned it, that apart from communication, stress also affects our sleep because your body is in constant fright or fight mode. And that means that if your body is expecting danger, all the time or expecting to solve something all the time. That means the body will not be able to find time to rest. The body is always active. So sleep is an indicator. Another indicator for can be physical appearance. So when someone is no longer taking care of it, the person is always maybe not cleaning up, not being well kept, dirty clothes and all that. And also frequent tiredness, body aches, somatic. In Africa, even research has shown that we Africans associate mental health issues more with somatic symptoms than describing our emotions. So we can say we're having body aches. We are more comfortable saying, I have headache, I have body aches, I have leg pains, than to say, I feel like life is no longer worth living. So, that is something very unique with us here. So also mood is another thing you look out for. When somebody is always irritability is a clear measure that someone is struggling. So irritability is like someone gets angry at times that you don't expect the person. Like Dr. Fo mentioned he said that when the child says, "Mommy, it's time to eat," then she just, so those kind of unusual irritability, the person is talking back at you, the person is just angry, the person is not smiling. You are telling the person, smile now. He's not interested. And also how they relate is also a key indicator. Very, very key. So maybe at the early times, the person you're able to create an enabling environment to have good communication and all that. And suddenly you notice that this person is avoiding you. The person is no longer engaging. The person, when visitors come, if you want to have family time and you want to maybe invite the person is saying, no, I'm not interested. The person is not speaking up, is always quiet. Those are the things. And then most importantly, in their work, the person is always forgetful. You send someone on an errand and the person comes back, says, or the person makes mistake, goes to the market, and there are a lot of mistakes. And then sometimes pace. You find out the person is a bit slower in the way the person carries his activities, and then maybe lateness to work. If somebody that comes, lateness and absence. So it's not only about when somebody says, I'm dying, or when somebody cries out for help. These are some of the they're not little, but they are the signs you can look out for. And when will you now be concerned? When do you say you are concerned? So sometimes, I like that Chiagozen mentioned it on the call, that sometimes you allow, when somebody is sad, you have the right to process your emotions. If someone makes you sad, you have the right to feel sad. This has nothing to do with mental health. If you have undergone stress and you feel like being alone, you can be alone. If you say, I don't want to talk to anybody, you have the right to say, I don't want to talk to anybody. It's your way of reconciling your mental health. But if your domestic worker if you have a miscommunication and maybe you have a small quarrel with your domestic worker and maybe for 2 days, you people are not talking to each other, that's not mental health. That's a normal human relationship. People take time to recover and build back their relationships. But when do you now become concerned? Generally, for mental health, 2 weeks is usually the mark, especially emotional problems, depression and co. So when something now persists for more than 2 weeks, then that's when you now start saying that, knowing that there is a problem, Then another clear way to notice a problem is when somebody even says it, like, when you notice that somebody is exhibiting suicidal thoughts, the person is talking about, I want to end my life, I want to harm myself, then that is a red mark that you need to really take very, very, very serious. And then we mentioned functioning in the beginning. For me, functioning is the most important. This is personal to me. Functioning is the most important indicator of to notice mental health. Immediately, someone is no longer able to contribute, to use his or her talents, then know that there is a problem, So these are some of the things you need to. So what are you able to do? What will you do when you notice these things? So there's what we call mental health first aid, but it's a theoretical term, but the underlying principles of mental health first aid is engagement. Don't disengage, don't shout on people, curse people. You have to engage, and you have to do it in a very calm and respectful way. So when you notice that people have changed, this is not the person I know, you need to call the person. You need to ask the person gently. You need to engage. It's not time to start, because what I've noticed is once, not just domestic violence, naturally, people just start putting up things in their mind, theories. Did I do anything to this person? What happened? And before you know it, your own negative thoughts about that person will begin to influence the next action that you are going to take about that person. So the best way is to engage, and then talk things through. Talking is the most important aspects of mental health intervention, talking. Because one, talking is even an outlet, a way of relieving stress and relieving whatever you have inside. It's an outlet. The mouth is an outlet. So once you speak and let out, you see yourself more calm. It's like a burden relief to you. And also the other way around, once you talk and engage, the person begins to know that, okay, this person really cares about me. So you have to engage. And then when you engage, you begin to know exactly what the person is going through. So I think I will stop here. And yeah, I don't know if there's any other thing I missed.
Amazing. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
You guys, where are the claps now? Where are those love emojis we promised in the beginning that we're going to be pumping? Thank you so much. Thank you so much again. I want to do light bulb moments at this point. I want you guys to share in the comment section some of the things that have stood out to you. What did you hear? I feel like there's so much wisdom in the room right now. And if you're not taking notes, there's a possibility for you to just hear only what we'll say towards the end. But I want you to pause right now and just reflect on what you've heard. It doesn't have to be too many. It doesn't have to be too deep. But for you personally, what did you hear? One of the things, Mr. Achuka, I heard from you was you said that the home is a place of rest for you, right? Thank you so much. Thank you for your claps and accolades. I love it. I love it. Keep it coming. Keep it coming. It helps with the ginger in the room. You said the home is a place for rest for you as the employer, like you're done with all of the hustle of the day and you want to come home and rest. And I remember just as you said it, I was like, where is the place of rest for the domestic employer, for the domestic employee? Because your home is their place of work, and if we're not careful, they have no place to rest. And that's why the relationship, what you said about the lines being very blurry is so true. So the idea is, why are we having this conversation is so that we can also be equipped to make the workplace a restful place. Because remember that Dr. Onfon said that if we continuously are exposed to stress, then your cortisol level rises and is unable to reset. And that's where people now start having chronic issues. They start having mental health outbursts, mental health illnesses. Just you spiral down on that continuum that we keep referring to, right? So I guess it's important that we're mindful of the atmosphere in our houses. And it's something I've started to say very much. Once I noticed that in my house, for instance, I don't even have a domestic worker right now. But once I notice that my kids or myself or my husband are just getting very edgy, I'm like, let's de-escalate. That's the word we use in our house. Let's de-escalate. Okay, everybody deep breaths, calm down. Whatever is taking away our peace, and I tell my kids, this house is a peaceful house. Whatever takes away our peace has to leave. If we say toy, I'm happy to throw it away if we cannot resolve this conflict. But our focus is to ensure that we're having a peaceful house. And where we can't, we de-escalate. And my kids know. De-escalation, deep breaths, take a walk, go to your room, whatever. But just being able to ensure that the atmosphere in the house is not up, because it eventually influences productivity. One other thing you said that's so true is the adaptation period, and I wrote it down. And even in workplaces, I worked on a job, and when I came in, they told me, we don't expect you to know anything until after 6 months. And I was like, They're like, we're working with you, we're supporting you. Just basically don't have too high an expectation of yourself. This work is tedious, it's intense. We will walk you through. At the end of 6 months, you will start to have a sense of what's expected of you. How many of us have that kind of orientation in Nigeria, even in the workplace? You come in and they're loading you up and they're already writing like reviews. How many of us as employers even review our employees, like domestic workers, review their work weekly? One of the things I tell a lot of the people, because I do a lot of consultancy for families, like private consultancy for domestic workers and their employers privately. One of the things I would encourage you to do is have a one-on-one. Every Sunday or Friday, sit with your staff and say, what did we do well? What can we do differently? What do we want to achieve next week? One-on-one, it can be 30 minutes, it can be 1 hour. But I'm just imagining as a domestic worker or employer, you have that period set aside during your orientation with your employer, like you're just sitting down and you are having that conversation. I feel like it's a beautiful experience and it has like a transformative effect on your relationship where you're consistently, I think it was one of the weeks we talked about complimenting them, telling them how amazing they are doing. Mental health, it translates into healthy mental health during a probationary period. Do we even have onboarding? We bring them in and we just ask the same questions. You sabi cook, you sabi, oh yeah, these are the things I want you to do. The very next day, you're handing your kids over to them, you're going to work. It's overwhelming. It's super, super overwhelming, even for them. Right? So yeah, just a lot of things. Are we putting in our light bulb moments? A few of these questions we will not be able to continue having. We will continue them in the DEC group because our time is fast spent. But the later part of our conversation would revolve heavily on communication and conflict resolution. How can we ensure that you're identifying, this is something we talked about before, how does your unresolved anxiety or trauma show up in your daily interactions? Thank you so much. I see your chats coming in. I love it. How can employers create homes where people feel respected, heard, and psychologically safe? I want us, when we started at first, week 1, we talked about the fact that this is where we are as a people, as a nation, as a culture, as a continent, but this is where we can be. So we're building on that mindset on a daily basis, and we're saying it's possible for us to get to where we need to do better as a people. It's not rocket science. We're not asking you to be an alien. We're not asking you to be superhuman. We're saying that you pull from your humanity as it currently is and start to show up intentionally as employers. What we'll talk about throughout the course of this week in the DEC. By the way, the DEC is the Domestic Employers Circle, and that's where the bulk of the impact happens. That's where we have like deeper conversations about this. If you someone from my team will drop the link to the DEC circle. If you haven't joined, or if you want to join our circle, I feel like it's an amazing place for you to have like the resources and the support you need for an ongoing conversation. But in the DEC circle, we're going to be having conversations around psychological safety. What does that even mean? What if you get a domestic worker and they're just plain afraid to speak? Mr. Chuka talked about it a little bit. He said, engage, communicate. Don't get angry. Your first instinct shouldn't be shouting. What's wrong with you? Every time you're always carrying face. Are you an Obanje? Every time people, you're just unhappy, someone is already disengaged. We don't want to berate them to be further disengaged. How do we engage? We're going to have those questions. How do we create an environment of trust? But here's even another part. Sometimes, like when I discuss with employers and I'm having this one-on-one meeting, some of the things we hear is, I'm just naturally kind. I just want to do, like I've seen employers that are extremely nice. In fact, their biggest problem is that they quickly blur the lines between being an employer and being like a sister or a mommy to their employee. So the first instinct of these employers is to be empathetic, to be kind to these people. And so sometimes they blur the line. So the question I want us to also be asking ourselves is, how can we be empathetic and still hold people accountable? Yes, I want to be kind and acknowledge the fact that you're a worker migrating, but how can I also ensure that I'm holding you accountable to our contract because you're here to work? How can we find that balance? Where is the line between understanding somebody and just giving excuses that are disabling? Because sometimes the biggest issues we have with our domestic employers, we're their biggest enablers, we're the ones encouraging it one way or the other. How can we correct? I like what Dr. Mfon said. Sometimes the word discipline should not necessarily find its expression in the way we know it in our relationship between our employers and our employers and employees. In the workplace, discipline happens. They will give you in regular office spaces. You can be given a formal warning. You can be given a coaching conversation. You can be placed on administrative leave while they're doing an investigation. All that is discipline. So what does that look like? The last question says, how do we correct without humiliating? Is it possible to do it where you're just honestly separating the problem from the person? You have a problem with punctuality, you're not a bad person. It's so difficult. You have a problem with remembering, doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. And then, of course, managing difficult conversations. How do you address poor performance with compassion? And for me, I would say, how do you do it consistently so that the person is not hearing it one day, you just sit down and you just berate them, tell them how since they came to your house for the past 2 years, how can we deliver these poor performance conversations compassionately, but consistently? When trust is broken, how can we rebuild it? Dr. Chuka said it's possible for us to get into a space where you're not talking to your dom, people are just carrying face, right? But how do you walk your way backwards? How do you build trust after a conflict has happened? How can you have difficult conversations without losing control of your emotions? What does forgiveness look like? Amazing questions. I want us to get to a point where we hear back from our employers on the call for the next 15 minutes. We're just going to block out this next few minutes for questions and feedback. What stood out to you in today's conversation? Please feel free to unmute yourself or ask your questions in the chat box below. Thank you. Ms. Nkem said one-on-one will go a long way to help them feel welcomed. Absolutely. I agree with that. Does anybody have a question or want to contribute to the conversation? What are you noticing in your homes? Normal me will be nervous when everywhere is quiet, but I'm learning to have good mental health and just wait.
Yeah, you need to be comfortable with silence.
Yeah.
I guess I like the part. Hello to my cousin or my cousin's cousin. Hi, Yvonne. How about you? I think I like the part about self-regulating. I think we hear the word often, but I didn't know that sorry, I'm using my laptop just in case, and I'm not using my earphones just in case.
We're not hearing you very well. It's a bit low.
Okay, can you hear me now? No?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm not using my headphones. So I said it's just self-regulating. I think it's a word I have come to like because it just sort of reminds you all the time that you're sort of responsible for your reactions. So that is just good to hear again. And asking yourself, because like when she was saying she'd get upset with her son about asking for food. And I'm just wondering whether it's the whole thing about people who don't know the way to the kitchen, why am I the one that has to provide it, right? All of that frustration, but just sitting with yourself to ask yourself why you're responding that way. I think it's a level of awareness or self-awareness that we all sort of need in interactions with ourselves and with other people. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Auntie Ugonna from Wiki.
Yeah. If I may add something, thank you, Gunnar. And there are different ways you can self-regulate. And I think sharing that will help so people know that there are ready tools, right? So if you feel that you're really upset, and this helps with your domestic worker, with your romantic relationship, whatever relationship, you feel you're in a heightened state of emotion, we've recognized that just giving yourself a little time can help change a whole lot. So you can count down from 20. In your mind, nobody's seeing you, hearing you, you just count down. You'll be surprised that your response will be totally different after 20 seconds than it would have if you opened your mouth immediately. If the place where you are, you're in a space that is inducing that level of emotion, you can just excuse yourself and say, let me take a walk. If you're home, go take a shower. If you're really, really angry, excuse me, and you're about to break somebody's head, go and take a cold shower. What the temperature does is that it shocks your body. That change in temperature brings you back to the present. And so it shifts your mind from the thought that is inducing that emotion to, okay, this water is so cold. So sometimes people carry ice and just hold ice. Trust me, you can't hold ice for 20 seconds and be responding angrily at the same time. So we need to know, okay, these are certain things I can do. You can go to the gym and just go box that stuff, or run. Exert that, energy that you're experiencing in the moment. Those are some ways we can, relieve ourselves from heightened emotions so that we are not pouring out how we feel on somebody in the moment when we are so upset or so overwhelmed. So find out what works for you and, try different ways of self-regulating. And that can definitely help get you to the place where you're now in control of your emotions and your emotions are not the ones calling the shot.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Dr. Onfon and Auntie Ugonna. One of the things I had written down I forgot to share was the fact that sometimes you hear people say, you keep making me angry. You keep making me beat you, taking away the responsibility of their emotional regulation from them to the other person. And I feel like that for me is like the biggest premise for abuse. Even in romantic relationships, you hear people say it's because of the way you did. That's why that's why. So you're basically outsourcing your ability to take care of yourself and making it the other person is not the other person. And I guess for me, that's something I was going to highlight about what mental health is regulating yourself. In other words, if this person never changes, how do you cope with it? Because there's a possibility, because we can't control the other person, there's a possibility that that thing will not change. And I liked again the emphasis on ensuring that we have terms like a contract that regulates our activity. That should be the thing we go back to. And it's okay in Nigerian homes for you to tell your domestic worker is not working. Can we normalize this conversation where you're saying, we've tried everything, it's just not working, and let them go. Before we get to that point where we have to hit, beat, it becomes an abusive relationship. Just take them back to their family. I know that sometimes it's not as easy as I'm saying it, like they're in school. You've paid school fees. Their parents really want them to stay, but the person doesn't want to stay. So there's that tension. It's okay to say it's not working so that we don't make it into the news for battering our domestic workers and just being people that you would not ordinarily be. Because when we're thinking of the changes we're seeing with domestic workers, sometimes you can also change. Those relationships can change you. You were not shouting before, now you're shouting. You've never beat anybody in your life, now you're beating. It's not necessary. Just get to that point where you're like, it's not working, it's okay. But sometimes we're selfish, we're worried, we're fearful. How will I cope? So you're managing, and sometimes that management produces poor mental health and then, of course, ruins the relationship, both for you and your domestic employee. And remember that it has a ripple effect on your house, on your home, just the atmosphere in your home. Thank you so much for that. Do we have any more questions? We have 10 more minutes. Okay. I'm just going to ask the speakers to give us like their final thoughts, something you want everybody to remember before they leave. But my question to everybody today is, what's one thing you can make, one change you can make today or tomorrow? And if everybody doesn't mind, please, I want everybody to speak or at least share in the comment section. After today's conversation, we've said so much. What's one thing you're just like, whether or not I have a domestic worker, just in the context of mental health generally, whether it's self-care or being mindful or checking where you are on the continuum, or even just knowing that everybody has mental health, what's something that you're going to do differently? Yes, Adobe, please go ahead.
All right. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much, the speakers. I've just been listening. It's been a lot to digest. Thank you. Moving forward, these are things that I personally am looking forward to practice. So one thing that actually stood out for me was your notes on self-awareness, because I think most of the times, honestly, we could be the problem. That's just it. I'm not talking about having a domestic help or something, but sometimes I find myself, when you sit and reflect, you realize, oh, why did I even scream at this person? I mean, they were just, just saying something. So I think self-awareness is key. And in self-awareness, we could, I, as a person, this is a note for me to actually resolve things when they need to be resolved, so that I don't carry it over and then extend it to others. So yeah, thank you so much.
Amazing. I like it. Being reflective in the moment right now. How can we address it right now so that it doesn't fester and it doesn't turn into something else? I like that. Thank you so much, Miss Adobe. Do we have any more comments? Miss Nkem, please, can you drop the link to the DEC? Okay, I think she's dropped it already. Please join the group for more conversations. We're going to be having conversations throughout the next year, and you don't want to miss it. You really don't want to miss it. Okay. In the absence of any other comments, we're going to use the next few minutes to just hear like final words from our speakers. What's one thing you would think everybody should not play with? Like if you do not hear any other thing this evening, this afternoon, depending on where you're joining in from, go home with this. Dr. Hon, I see that you unmuted yourself.
Yeah, I just want to encourage myself and everybody that it starts with you, right? You can't change the past. We've made mistakes. We've done a lot of things that in hindsight now we wouldn't have done. We can't change our family of origin, right? And lived experiences, but we can decide what we do going forward. And so being intentional about your well-being, right? Being intentional about that. And if that includes what we've talked about so many things, just be able to sit down and say, okay, what are certain things in my life that may be contributing to a poor mental well-being? I want you to understand that people with mental disorders can have a healthy mental state, right? Because they're managing it. Just like when someone has diabetes and is properly managed, we don't say that they're sick, right? We don't say this person is sick. So just because you've not been diagnosed does not mean that you're mentally healthy. And, and just because maybe you have a mental disorder does not mean that you're mentally unhealthy. So we need to understand those things and say, okay, what can I do now to ensure that I continue to improve and maintain a healthy mental state? There's a certain things I can do. I can build strong relationships. I can ensure that I'm not putting on myself more than I can take. I go for those yearly physical checkups. I reach out for help when there is need. These are protective factors that we've talked about. I make sure that my relationships are healthy ones. Some of us are in unhealthy relationships and we are still holding on to it when we know that it's killing us, So things like that. When we do what we can do, then we can pray and trust that God will take care of the things that are outside of our control. So that's just my takeaway.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Dr. Mfon. Mr. Trika, final words.
Yeah, I would just attach myself to all the beautiful things Dr. Fon said. Just to add that people usually expect mental people to complain before they take action or before they notice that someone is going through a mental health problem. But usually most mental health problems shows up as a behavior change. So you have to be someone that is very observant of the next person and of yourself to be able to understand how mental health affects the person or yourself. Then domestic workers must understand that they are a vulnerable group, whether a professional person or someone you took from another person. So they are a vulnerable group. They need time to adjust. They need time to learn the work, and they need time to, become better people. Then what do you start doing? You have to make sure you communicate regularly with respect. I like what you said, Chiagozema, about having clear rules and regulations, because that is what shows the lines of professionalism and everything you want to do. So make sure you have clear rules, check in all the time, and then don't treat everything as a bad behavior or as maybe someone doesn't have capacity. Sometimes look through, see yourself when you're dealing with a domestic worker, see yourself sometimes as a psychologist, as a natural psychologist, so that you'll be able to identify some behaviors and some signs of distress. And then the last thing is communication is very, very, very key. If you notice things, don't assume. We do a lot of assumptions. Don't assume. Find the courage to engage with people so that you'll be able to know more. And also do it in a very, very respectful way. Thank you.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Respect. I liked what you said. Assumption is this is me paraphrasing, but assumption is the least form of knowledge, the lowest form of knowledge. Yeah, ask questions. I want to encourage us to also be very curious. When people come into your house, don't just assume that, you know what they say now. People from Abakaliki are always like this. Oh, all these domestic workers from the East, this is how they present. Talking about assumptions. They're from the North now. Oh, if you get from Adamawa, those ones stay. You know, those things we say to ourselves. Don't make assumptions. Sit with people. And I guess for me, every time I think of mental health, for me personally, it's just an invitation to be human, to sit into my humanity, enough to study myself, and then to show up like that in my relationship with other people. I liked what Nsikak said in the comment section. Thank you so much. She said she learned to be very intentional about self-care. If you're a domestic employer that self-cares, if you take care of yourself, it's easy for you to create a system in your house that allows your domestic workers rest. One of the changes that had to happen around the time when I was talking about my extra stress was I got clear instructions to give my domestic worker 1 hour every day. And I instead to insist that she goes to bed every day, because I started to see what that, self-care, telling you, taking off Monday was doing to me. And I was like, if I'm feeling like this, I'm sure she would, benefit from taking time regularly. Some of our workers work round the clock, literally. Yeah. So pause, accept your humanity, and then that thing that's working, share it with your staff. I think we can make a difference. I'm happy for these conversations. I'm super grateful for everybody who made it here. Thank you for showing up every day. For me, again, it tells me that you're thinking, you're reflecting, you want to do better. For our facilitators who have taken time out of their very busy schedules, thank you so much. God bless you. This has been so intentional, so enriching. I'm just so excited about what we're doing, and I'm envisaging the kind of impact this will have in the lives of people who have joined and people who will share this video. And in light of that, and in the same vein, I want to say that this video will be available for 1 week, and then it goes into our training content. So you have to pay to access it. So if you know anyone who needs to watch this or just be a part of this conversation, please share this video. Our replay will be on our YouTube channel. We're going to answer some of the outstanding questions throughout this week in the DEC circle. It's been 3 weeks of intense, amazing conversation, and we have 1 more week to go. So I'll see you guys and everybody same time next week. We'll be talking about how to run a home with minimal supervision, how to have like structure. That's something that's very new to us in Africa and especially Nigeria. But I'm really excited. Thank you so much. God bless you guys. Have an amazing rest of your weekend. Ciao, ciao. Thank you. Thank you so much.